Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 7 of distance learning. We are just 2 weeks away from the very end of your senior year, and we are diving into the last 10 years of history. And we are going to split this time into two for tonight, and then for these next two videos. And then next week, we will finish up just by talking a little bit about 2020, a few things that have happened since this year started in January. And then we will end with a final conclusive course question that asks you to look back at the entire course and make some judgments about where you think you might go forth with the knowledge that we have gone over. So we are going to start tonight in 2010, right off the bat in January of 2010. January 12th, 2010, Haiti, country of Haiti, experienced a devastating earthquake. It was a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that affected in total about 3 million people. You can see here on this map the area at which it affected, obviously affecting a little bit of the Dominican Republic, but it did occur in Haiti. Altogether, like I said, about 3 million people were affected. It killed approximately 316,000 people. The United States did send aid to Haiti to try to help them rebuild. Then in March of 2011, so a little over a year later, Japan was devastated by an earthquake and tsunami. So this is also known as the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. So we know it as the Japanese tsunami and earthquake of 2011, but the other name is the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. The region that it's in is the Tohoku region. It's in the northern part of Honshu, which is the large island here of the 4 main islands of Japan. It was the most powerful earthquake recorded in Japanese history and the 4th most powerful earthquake in the world since 1900. It moved the island of Honshu, physically moved the entire island about 8 feet to the east. So when it occurred, it was so powerful that it moved the entire island. About 16,000 deaths occurred, mostly from drowning. It also caused a number of nuclear accidents, and it destroyed hundreds of thousands of buildings. So there is a lot of footage. You can see a picture here of buildings destroyed, but there is also footage that you can Google, you can look up through YouTube, where you literally see the wave moving across, carrying with it cars, boats, houses. In this video, there is a house that is on fire, and the water moving through is carrying that house on fire. It is the costliest disaster in history. It cost $235 billion to restore things back to order. And that is, like I said, the costliest natural disaster in history. Your assignment that goes along with this first video is going to focus on the Arab Spring. Some of you may have heard of the Arab Spring. It was a series of anti-government uprisings. It affected Arab countries in North Africa and the Middle East. It started in 2011, although technically at the end of 2010, the very last few days of December 2010, but then really got going in January of 2011. And that series of anti-government uprisings has become known as the Arab Spring. It started as a response to oppressive regimes and to rulers, but also in response to the low standard of living. And it sparked beginning with protests in Tunisia. So if you look on this map here, Tunisia is the dark tealish country here. towards the middle of North Africa. So Tunisia, like I said, was the very first place where protests occurred. There, protests began, ended up taking out the ruler that had been in power. Tunisia was the very first country that experienced this. Their leader was forced out, and they became a democracy. So Tunisia today is a democracy. It is considered one of the biggest successes of the Arab Spring. Egypt followed. They were the second country to experience this wave of protests and this part in the Arab Spring. Today, it is what we call a limited democracy. The Egyptians were able to force the leader out of power. Unfortunately, the leader that came in after him tried to dismantle the democracy that had been put in place. He too was removed from power. And today, while Egypt, like I said, calls itself a democracy, it is effectively run by the military. So that is why we call it a limited democracy, or as you can see in this map here, a democratic facade, meaning they are purporting to be a democracy, but we know they're not really acting as such. So that initial wave of revolutions and protests, it slowed by the middle of 2012. So it lasted for about a year and a half before it started to slow down. There are many people today who refer to the ongoing conflicts, namely in Syria and in Yemen, as continuations of the Arab Spring. We see a lot of differences between these countries as they fight their own oppressive regimes and rulers, but one of the number one things that unites them is the technique that they use of both civil resistance and their use of social media. Social media plays a huge role in the Arab Spring, and that is something that we see throughout all of these countries, throughout those uprisings. People are using both social media and civil resistance to stand up and protest. Like I said, one of the continuing pieces of the Arab Spring is the Syrian civil war. So the Syrian civil war officially began in 2011. We see that wave of popular unrest from the Arab Spring arrive a little late in Syria. And what started as a peaceful uprising by the people quickly evolved into a very brutal and armed conflict when the president of Syria, still the current president, Bashar al-Assad, started to violently suppress those protests, namely by using chemical weapons against his own people. He has created both a humanitarian disaster and an international refugee crisis by doing so. In 2013, al-Assad was forced on the defensive because he had continued to use those chemical weapons against his own people after being repeatedly asked to stop by a number of governments. This humanitarian disaster is one that has displaced millions of people, made almost 4 million people into refugees. That is a large number of people, and it has created a massive refugee crisis where people are unable to be at home, unable to be in their own country, and are being forced into these refugee camps with no place to go. The Syrian civil war is still ongoing today in 2020. Then on May 2nd, 2011, we see the finally, the death of Osama bin Laden. So this video here is President Barack Obama talking about the raid that he ordered that killed Osama bin Laden. He ordered a military operation. It was called Operation Neptune Spear, and it was carried out by both the CIA and SEAL Team 6. The finding of Osama bin Laden and then the killing of him ended a nearly 10-year search for him. He was eventually found and then killed in a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. We did not tell, the American government did not tell the Pakistani government that we had found him. We simply went in with SEAL Team 6, went in and took him out and arrived in the middle of the night there and killed Osama bin Laden after, like I said, that 10-year search, almost 10-year search for him after he organized the attacks on 9/11. So the Pakistani government is one that we still today have some tension with. We accuse them often, have accused them often in the past of harboring terrorists and giving aid to them. They continue to deny it, but this is one major example of where he was very much out in the open, and likely that Pakistan knew that he was there. From September until November of 2011, a major protest occurred. It was a protest against economic inequality in the United States. It lasted for, like I said, 2 months, from September to November, in a park in New York City's financial district. This was known as Occupy Wall Street. They occupied part of Wall Street as part of their protests. It also sparked smaller Occupy movements around the world, where people in other cities occupied spaces to protest against economic inequality as well. It was originally marketed as a large march on Wall Street, but it grew from there. They developed a slogan called "We Are the 99%," representing, of course, that 99% of the people, not that 1%, that top 1% of earners in the country. These protesters stayed in Zuccotti Park, this is the name of the park in the financial district in New York City, until they were officially forced out by officials on November 15th, 2011. And then in 2012, November of 2012, both Washington State and Colorado voted to become the first 2 states to legalize marijuana for recreational use in the United States. This vote took place in November of 2012, but it wasn't put into it was not actually enacted and put into the works until January of 2013. To date, 11 states plus Washington, D.C. have legalized marijuana for recreational use. Those states are, of course, Alaska, California, Colorado. Like I said, D.C., not a state, but Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. There are 22 other states that also allow medical marijuana, and just have not passed laws to allow recreational marijuana yet. After you're done watching this video, you can head over and please take a look at the mini research assignment. You're going to choose a country that was affected by the Arab Spring and try to learn a little bit more about it. Of course, if you have any questions, please let me know.